I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hello and welcome. It's Sunday morning here in Israel, the 1st of September. I'm joined today by a good friend, Yisrael Naaman. Yisrael has been a friend and a colleague now for longer than we should really admit, I think, over 30 years, 35 years. We've taught together, we've guided together for many, many years, and had more discussions than I think we can ever count in between. Yisrael's an historian. He's been teaching university also for decades, mostly at Haifa, but also at the Technion. He's the author of Hamas Jihad. You can see it behind him there as well. He actually wrote it. Very important, a very, very important book with absolutely important background on an organization that he and I have dealt with quite a bit over the years, but the world has suddenly awoken to over the past year. And he's also started a new project, Naaman Academy, and I'm going to let him describe that before we get into the business of talking about what's going on today. Yisrael, welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elliot. Okay, so we appreciate everything said. And yes, Elliot and I, we know each other for, 35 years. And we've worked together many, many years. So now putting together what's called the Naaman Academy, building courses online. And the purpose is to give people information based on documentation, historical record, not just I think this or that or something in TikTok. That's not the way it's done. And the bottom line is that we should all understand what's going on in the world. What is the historical background? And not just that someone throws out opinions. You have to base it. The old-time way of doing research and debating and understanding. Some of the courses that we will be introducing. The first one is exposing Islamic jihad. This is of extreme importance. I'll be going through 1,400 years of history, quite a few different sessions, but starting with the foundations of jihadi understandings that still exist today and have so shaken the world. And, it's here that we'll go through many of the much of the theology and the texts themselves, bring it up to where we are today. Most of the course we'll deal with in the last 100 years, but especially where we are today and how we've ended up in the situation that we are in, which is very unpleasant. After that, there'll be other courses dealing with anti-Semitism. What I do want to point out is that these are, in many cases, forbidden topics. You are not allowed to teach them in university, certainly not the history of jihad. Just imagine at Columbia or Harvard, MIT, wherever, right? The UP, what would have taken place if you had a course like this, all right? There's a lot of censorship out there. We are not allowing it, obviously, because we're teaching and we're doing it privately. We're hoping that the word will spread, that people need to know this, need to know the truth and have these understandings. Right? Naaman Academy, people want to go in, and there'll be a link. It's www.neemanacademy.co. Okay? Without any further ado, we'll get on with our topics.
Excellent.
And the topic in particular.
Yes.
Okay, so thank
Good.
you.
Yisrael, thank you, and highly recommend. As I said, we've taught together for many years, and I can readily say that it's always been a pleasure teaching with Yisrael, which is why we continue to do stuff together after 35 years. Uh, Today we woke up to tragic news that the bodies of 6 hostages were recovered from Gaza by the IDF. What makes it particularly tragic and unusual, I hate words like unique because there's always another case somewhere, is that in this case, the hostages were murdered by Hamas shortly before the Israeli troops got there. In other words, this was not the recovery of bodies of previously murdered hostages, which we've seen all too much of over the past few months, but here rather they were alive when the troops approached and their captors murdered them and then fled. And this, of course, has, aside from, as I said, the tragedy, and you can't repeat tragedy too many times, has enormous ramifications in terms of understanding what Hamas wants, what is part or could be part of a deal that might or might not happen. But it brings us all the way back to the origins, to October 7th and before, that got us into this in the first place, and the catastrophe of that day that led to the taking of hundreds of hostages, alive and dead. So we're going to look into that a bit, and I'm going to start, Yisrael, by asking you, how did everyone get it so wrong?
Okay. And unfortunately, it's been discussed between the two of us many, many times, and most people that we've discussed it with don't get it. But before we even do that, let's remember the date. September 1st, drop back how many years? To World War
85, exactly.
Exactly 85 years. And very much when I woke up this morning, I was working on other things, and then I heard about this. That was the first thing that came to mind. History does repeat itself. You think about what happened on September 1st in Poland, and of course to the Jewish community in World War II. Nazi.
And they didn't get him either until September 1st.
And even then, it took a while, I think, before it sank. So what's the problem? The issue here is that far too many people, policymakers, and it's the vast majority, don't understand that the issues of what I call philosophical materialism, that the well-being of the population, like what was being done, Israeli policy, and we can go back quite a while, that by enhancing the material well-being of the Palestinian population, which in itself isn't a bad thing, but the leadership there only saw it, certainly Hamas, jihadis, and they make it very clear. Bin Laden has made it very clear in his writings, as have others, that we're going to use this money against you. In other words, Karl Marx and Adam Smith are just tools to be used for jihad. In other words, philosophical idealism, okay? And what we're talking about here is the theology or ideology of the jihad is the ultimate objective. We'll use everything you give us in order to crush you, right? And I can give numerous examples. We certainly give an American example, right? Going back to what happened in Afghanistan, right? Beating the Soviets there, the evil empire, fine, oh, that's great. But to think that the Taliban would remain on the American side, it was ridiculous. They wrote it. Abdullah Azzam, who was a leading cleric, a jihad scholar on the battlefield, made it clear in what he put out as
who founded Al Qaeda.
Essentially, yes, the ideas that founded Al Qaeda. And he said, we get done with the Soviets, with the Russians. The Americans are doing even worse things by setting up thousands of schools that not only teach these Western ideas of democracy and liberalism, but they're educating girls and whatever else, and they are to be destroyed next. Yeah, and of course, the materials out there, either it's being read and ignored, being read, maybe not ignored by who read it, but then someone else is ignoring it on, and not paying attention. What happens here, if I skip forward to what goes on in Israel, okay? So one, we could talk about the 90s a bit when the Labor Party was in power, okay? Because I'm also going to deal with the Likud. Is that the new Middle East, Shimon Peres, right? That it turned Gaza into a Singapore with 7 big industrial zones, a new a port, all these wonderful things. And Yasser Arafat, who many thought, and I was amongst them, said maybe that he is a secular nationalist and will want the good of his people, material well-being. But there was always that Islamist part of them, which we discovered rather quickly. They should have realized the minute he rejected all this and just wanted war. In other words, the second intifada. So that wasn't important. The importance was in defeating the Jews, destroying the state of Israel on
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
run forward, to where we are now.
Okay. I just want to clarify something here, because I think you've broken off into two related directions. Okay. One is what you call the materialism, I call economic determinism. We're talking about the same thing. The idea that economic factors are what drive people, and they're also rational, because that's built into that economic model, whether it's Adam Smith or Karl Marx. And it's interesting, these two guys who are on both ends of the economic spectrum make the exact same mistake as a basis of their premise. So the idea that people are only interested in economics is one thing, and as you started to say, and I'll let you go on in a moment, clearly not true. Ideology, religion, there are all sorts of things that trump economics and the way people behave. And this idea that all they want is what's good for themselves or the people is utter nonsense, and we've seen that over and over again. And another aspect of it, which is, if we're going there already, we're going to use, we meaning the jihadis, terrorists in general, we're going to use the system against itself. We're going to play into their mistake, and we're going to use that money not for the benefit of our people, but rather for the benefit of our war. Okay, and I just want to clarify that two related, but not exactly the same points, but we're seeing both of them. Go ahead. Thanks.
I think very good that you make the clarification and show where there is a bit of a difference. So let's fast forward it, and here I have a tremendous fight with everybody trying to say the left and the right. It's all the same thinking. And as you just pointed out, Elliot just pointed out, so, whether it's Karl Marx or it's Adam Smith, it's all the same. And what happened here with the Netanyahu government is they essentially empowered Hamas with allowing Qatari money to go in and deciding, right, that this is sort of a balance. We're going to be balancing here Hamas versus the Palestinian Authority for their own policies of splitting Palestinian leadership. But, as I've always said, you don't make a deal on anything for any perceived objective by cutting a deal with jihadis and giving them money and empowering them in any way, shape, or form. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do. If you're trying to have a two-state solution to make peace, if you're trying to have the greater land of Israel, you keep jihadis out of it. They are only your enemy. If you add up the billions, and we're talking tens of billions overall, that have been poured into Gaza over the years since Hamas took over, okay, we're talking having overthrown the Palestinian Authority by 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're talking 17 years. Think of everything they could have done instead of all these underground tunnels, all the weapons, ammunition, the smuggling, you name it, and the destruction wrought not only against Israel in the October 7th attack, but if you look at the destruction, all right, they've suffered. And even before that, right, we've had quite a few conflicts for sort of major border issues and other minor ones, but now, and it doesn't move anywhere. Not only that, they have become the Islamic State Caliphate in action, whereas previously we thought, okay, they're a hybrid. They're partially a jihad, and the other part is what's called a social dawah, care for your population. They made it very clear afterwards, by the end of October, nothing to do with what goes on above ground. We're only underground. Let the world deal with the Palestinian civilian population. We are fighting a jihad to the end. Okay, and I'd say even those of us the most skeptical, I wouldn't say I was shocked by this, but I was a bit surprised because generally if you're married to the population, you don't do things like this. But it shows that jihad overcomes everything. It doesn't matter. And here I make a comparison to what went on in Nazi Germany by the end. Call it Hitler in the bunker, just like Elliot and I have discussed Sinwar in the
bunker, in the tunnel.
Don't care. In other words, it doesn't matter what happens to anyone. The whole thing can burn down in Valhalla, or in this case, in the great jihad uprising failure, and the shaheed, right, sacrifice that is to be made, shaheed being martyrdom. Right? And the West does not get it. They think you can negotiate. It does
Israel?
This, yes.
All right. I'm going to interrupt you here because I think you've laid out the what very well.
Okay.
Okay, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I'm a tough grader.
Yeah.
But I'd like to shift in the time that we have left to the why. In other words, not why do they do it, but why don't we get it? Why do, and I don't know if there's a clear answer, but at least a little bit of insight. Why do people, and here I have to say, to the credit of the two of us, we've been talking about this for quite a long time, longer than the October 7th, and we get it. We've talked about how this whole economic thing is secondary to ideology and religion and jihad and all of that. Why do so many people in leadership, from left and right, simply not understand what's going on the other side? Is it simple projection, or is there more than that?
Well, the way I look at it is that we project our values on the other side. I've also called it quite often liberal hubris, and we've discussed it that it's sort of a bit beyond that.
There's wishful thinking. There's wishful thinking in there as well.
Right. And when I say liberal hubris, it includes the conservatives also, in other words, liberal democratic societies, that they say, no, but they've got to think like us because, you believe in equality and equal rights, and that we're really here to have a better life and to get on with others, and we're pluralistic and things like that. And for sure, the other side has to think that way. And in a way, it's a conceit we have on the Western side, right? You have it for sure in academia when they dismiss, they must have been provoked. Somebody must have done this, that, and the other to them. Without, and when here I speak of Western academia, without them going into the sources. What does it say in Islamic sources when there were great Islamic conquests in previous generation? We're going way back to the 7th century, the 600s and beyond. And we're continual, and the brutality, which is written about by the victors, right? It brings you back to World War II. How do we know so much about it? What the victors at the time were writing, right? The Germans up in the 40s and even towards the end of the war. The same thing, and we don't get it. They write it clearly that we will defeat you. We will destroy you. And what do I hear? They're posturing. When I wrote the book, many people said, you're being paranoid. And then there's always these inferred sort of like, you Jews type of things I would hear inferred. Nobody would say it directly. Had lots of liberal students from outside the country, right? And even people
Islamophobe.
Islamophobe for sure. How could you say that about them? You're lumping a whole group together. It reminds me of what was said about Samuel Huntington and his famous book.
Yeah.
That he spoke of Islam's bloody borders in the 90s, and people called him all sorts of names, racist, this, that, and the other. Simply we're analyzing what's out there. You don't come in coming in with what your final conclusion is, what they say, and then or firing, your weapon and then drawing the bullseye so everything goes into the middle.
That's right.
First, you have to have the target out there and what's correct. This for sure, and projecting that they would behave like us or we, and therefore just tremendous failure. And we had this right up through October 7th, right? They had gotten, another 15,000 entries for workers, Palestinian workers. And we had all the information getting ready to break through, and not just in a few sectors. It was there, but it's like, no. There's a concept that it's being done. And by the way, everybody was holding to it just about.
Yes.
I would say the only thing that when I looked at it, I said, the timing, okay, that's always a question because, you at least have the minimum for, how should we put it, a serious attack on your border, right? And have it thought out. And the tactical disaster there, it cannot be left aside. Elliot's much more of an expert on that than I am, but I did lots of border patrol in my time in the reserve, so I know how a border is supposed to look. And when that happened, I said, wait a minute, this is not the way.
Where is everybody? Right.
Where did everybody go? Okay,
right.
So there are multiple, what's called multiple dysfunctions. Okay.
I just good. I just want to add one thing to that before we conclude.
Yeah.
Because I have no argument or criticism with anything you said about the liberal hubris and all of that. But I would add one other point, And we're seeing it right up until today. Psychologically, it is very difficult for people to accept that there is no solution other than fighting. In other words, there's got to be a way to reason with these people. There's got to be a way to cajole them, to entice them, to appease them, to give in to some of their demands. And we see it with the American leadership. We see it with part of the Israeli leadership and population. Okay, we've beaten them up enough. Now let's sit down and talk. Now let's work it out. And there's always the sense of we saw with Arafat back in the Oslo days. We can just sit, figure it out, have a cup of coffee. It's reminiscent of Chamberlain and Hitler after Munich. Chamberlain's statements. All right, we figured out what the problem is and we solved it. And of course, there as here, they haven't figured out the problem because you can't solve this problem. And just as a final point, everybody talks about negotiations to end the war. And I've mentioned this in other places, and I'll say it again here. I'm sure I'll repeat it in the future. Hamas doesn't want the end to the war. The end to the war for Hamas is the end of Israel. What they want is an end to the Israeli offensive so they can continue the war. And here again, it's hard for us on our side to say, what do you mean? Let's just make a deal. So I think that's an add-on. All the things you said, I think, are the foundations to it. But on top of that, you've got this idea of we got to figure out a way out of this, because how can you not really come to some sort of solution?
Okay, and I'll throw in 2 words on that. That the only answer to jihadi attacks and to jihad, Islamic jihad itself, is total and utter defeat, right? Which you degrade, destroy, and I'll add to that, discredit, which is a topic for another discussion of how to do that, how to reform everything from within, but it's got to be totally discredited so you do not have a re-establishment of groups like the Islamic State Caliphate. That's, like we said, a whole nother discussion.
Good, and we will have it.
We will, for sure. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Yisrael, again, thanks for joining me and us to the audience. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll be doing other sessions with Yisrael and others. So in the meantime, stay safe, stay engaged, be well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.